Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 50th episode of 2023. Hard to believe 50 episodes, but goes by so quickly. Before I kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Five for Breakfast, and our gold sponsor, Network Connects. In Washington this week, comments are due tomorrow, Thursday, December 14th, to the FCC on proposed reclassification of fixed and mobile broadband as a telecommunications service under Title II of the Communications Act of 1934. And of course, FBA will be submitting comments. We certainly don't want any kind of chilling effect from the FCC that might kill all this great CapEx momentum we have right now on broadband infrastructure. Yesterday, the FCC affirmed the denial of Starlink's RDOF application. So FBA does applaud the FCC's decision to rescind the $885 million previously awarded to Starlink for RDOF and to uphold this decision, as this award would have redlined a large portion of the Midwest and Pacific Northwest from being eligible for fiber from BEAD and other funding programs. We're building out critical broadband infrastructure for generations to come, and we should not be using precious taxpayer dollars as short-term band-aids for good enough connectivity. Also, the state BEAD initial proposals are due December 27th to NTIA. There's still many outstanding proposals for both Volume 1 and Volume 2. Speaking of 2024, our first regional Fiber Connect workshop next year will be on February 8th in Richmond, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers, including Joey Winder from Treasury, who still has $1 billion left to spend on broadband infrastructure from the Treasury Capital Projects Fund. Registration for Richmond is now open, so please register today because this event will sell out. And you can see the upcoming Fiber Connect workshops we have through the year. Following Richmond, we have Little Rock in April, Deer Valley, Park City in June, Des Moines in September, and Albuquerque in November. And of course, our big Fiber Connect 2024 conference in Nashville is going to be July 28th to 31, and that is going to be epic. So I know that you guys will want to join us. Speaking of epic, I hope you can join me for the epic conclusion of Where's the Funding next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's a great series, and as we've explored issues such as the 25% match and letter of credit, and we have a great finale planned for you, so I hope you'll join us next week. That brings us today's Five for Breakfast session with our good friend and strategic partner, Mike Render, the CEO and principal analyst of RVA Market Research, who's going to be sharing with us the latest deployment numbers are in and just how fast is fiber broadband moving. Before I formally introduce Mike, I'd like to introduce David Norris from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you, Gary, and good morning, everyone who has joined us. Before we go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor for Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco, and our gold sponsor, Network Connects. Now, if you would all please keep in mind, all participants are in listen-only mode. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within the control panel on the side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's session. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find the recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We appreciate your input. Now I'll pass it back to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Well, thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest and good friend and strategic partner is Mike Render, the CEO and principal analyst of RVA Market Research. He's going to be sharing with us the latest deployment numbers are in, just how fast is fiber broadband moving. So Mike is the CEO and principal analyst of RVA Market Research and Consulting based in Tulsa. Mike has been a partner with the Fiber Broadband Association since 2002. And is generally known as the North America's premier market research firm tracking fiber optic deployment and consumer attitudes towards broadband. He has assisted some of the world's largest telecom corporations, individual communities, and the FCC. So welcome, Mike. And for our audience, please type in your questions go, and we'll work them into the Q&A at the end. With that, let me turn things over to Mike.
Very good, Gary. So yes, I'm excited to bring you the new numbers. We do this about this time every year, and this is about the 21st extension of that. Next slide, please. So we use a number of methods to get to our data. Just for your background, obviously no data is perfect, but we really try to triangulate from many different ways. Of course, we look at public information. We look at our own surveys. We do a number of surveys, about 250, 300 each year, of smaller providers in different ways. And then, of course, we use data from our consumer study, which also helps validate numbers as far as take rates and types of providers and so forth. And then, of course, the FCC data, formerly the 477 data, now the mapping data, data from other industry associations, and of course, interviews and data from vendors and engineers. So we triangulate all this and really try to come up with what I think is a pretty accurate view of the current situation with fiber. Next slide. So it was the worst of times. In one sense, this year has been tough. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide shows that, this is an index of 5 stocks that relate to fiber, especially in the US. And as you can see, it's been pretty tough. It's a crash of about 60% over the past year. And the question is, why is that? When, as you'll see, things look pretty bright in another sense. So next slide, let's go to that. And it shows, here's an example from some public data of a couple of different people where we analyzed. There in the left, it's an outside plant vendor, excuse me, in North America, with quarterly sales against an index set to the same scale of fiber movement and projection. And you can see there's a huge bubble at the end of 21 and 2022, which exceeded that trend line. And that, as many of you know in the space, occurred because there had been a shortage of supplies to some extent, and people were kind of building up to try to make sure they had the weaponology in their storehouse to go forward. But they overdid it a bit, and then of course interest rates raised, and financial people are saying we need to get that inventory down. So sales have dropped quite a bit for that company, down below the trend line. We think it'll probably might go a little bit lower and then start trending back upwards again. Same thing from the fiber vendor, in this case everywhere but China, but you can still see the bubble in 2022 and then dropping below. So it's an inventory correction factor that just has come into play. Next slide. So at the same time, Charles Dickens said it was the best of times. And the next slide will show where we are. And here's the drum roll with the new record set for annual growth. About 9 million homes passed by network operators in 23. This is the US alone. And so as you can see, we hit some other peaks, 4 million back in 2008, 7.2 million in 2019. And now we surpassed all that to 9 million. About 6 million uniquely passed homes. And those are homes that, excluding homes that are passed by 2 or 3 fiber providers. So just how many homes are passed. Next slide. And this shows where we are cumulatively. We're now at about 78 million homes passed, including second and third passings, 13% growth, and we're now up to about 31 million homes connected. So, we've come a long, long way since our first review of this, when it was about 9,000 homes passed, not 9 million. So things have really moved. I can remember when predicting 1 million homes passed a year was kind of met with some skepticism, and here we are with 9 million. Next slide. And here's the cumulative on unique homes passed, up to about 69 million unique homes passed against that 31 homes connected. And more and more we are seeing some places where fiber is going to the same home with multiple providers. The MSO provider or competitive provider against a telco perhaps, but this is occurring. Gary knows that well where he's sitting in Huntsville. There's several providers, so it's a phenomenon out there as well. Next slide. And take rates. This is a view of the take rates. The most important view is in the blue. The orange line shows against all passings. The blue is against unique passings. So how many homes that could get fiber are taking it? And you can see it dips somewhat. I've talked about this before. When growth accelerates, it takes a while to get those passings completed or connections. So it dips a bit, but we're actually on the rise again despite acceleration, up to about 45.4 average passings. And so that's pretty exciting. And we'll see this seems to be accelerating in some ways. Next slide. Here we show the passings as compared, and most of you have seen this slide before, but we'll keep updating it. We're now past 50%, 51.5% of households in the US, primary households connected, passed. And there's a smaller percent of unique second homes, Airbnb, and so forth. But just looking at the part that is focused on primary homes, that's a big measure. We're actually at 50%. That was a long-time goal of Fiber Broadband Association, and we've now passed that and going on to the next one. Obviously, doing it at a faster pace than coax and copper did, which took more years, even though there were fewer homes at the time, of course. But it's a difficult challenge, but fiber is actually really accelerating this year. Next slide. And in Canada, it's doing well as well. About over 11 million, 12 million homes marketed, 11 million unique estimated, 5 million connected. In their case, this includes resellers because the providers have to allow people to buy wholesale and sell as a competitive provider. But very similar take rate. Things are doing well in Canada as well. They've actually gone to a little higher percentage of their overall household base than the US. Of course, it gets tougher from here in Canada because of the rural nature of much of Canada. Next slide. Now, this shows the diversity of providers that is increasing over time. We're now at about 65% of the big guys, the tier one telcos, the AT&Ts and Verizons and Frontiers and derivatives that they've sold some property to. But that's actually gone down as a percent over time. The smaller guys, which are about 1,400 players now, a huge number of players in the United States, continue to increase in percentages. And all of these groups are important. They've all played an important role in the rollout of fiber, from rural electrics, municipals, MSO cable companies, CLECs, which really means competitive providers, and then the telephone incumbents, the tier 2s and 3s, which have been very important in the history of fiber. And finally, of course, the tier 1s. Next slide. Why is this occurring? Winning isn't just getting ahead of others, it's getting ahead of yourself. And fiber really does that, as you'll see in the next slide, where this is from our consumer study, which some of you saw earlier this year, but just reaffirming that in every case, in our tests that we do during our survey, random sampling tests, fiber is at the very top. The best speeds, the lowest cost, the lowest latency, the least jitter. In every category, fiber just beats the competition in the real world. These are all real world, through Wi-Fi, out through the network and back kind of tests. Next slide. And interestingly, almost everyone now, some smaller providers are not yet, but almost everyone is providing a gig or more, as you can see. So this is just really unique in the internet world. And of course, many of these, their at least top tiers are symmetrical as well, which no one else can do in terms of other types of delivery. Next slide. And we showed this in our consumer study as well. When we ask people, well, what's the best delivery method overall, no matter what you currently have, what's best? Now we're almost as 2/3 saying fiber, which is truly a milestone. It wasn't too far back when people were confused about 5G wireless and so forth, but now it's clearly fiber. And as you can see by type, their current type of delivery, people that tend to be fiber are even higher, up as high as 97% saying fiber. But even people like MSOs who have some fiber, but much less, even there, 54% are saying fiber is the best, which I would say would be a pretty worrisome sign for cable companies that are not moving to fiber. Many are, but not particularly the largest two. Next slide. And we continue to see that fiber wins among those churning the past 2 years. This is just the past 2 years. If you just look at that little slice of data, cable modem is losing and fiber is winning. And the next slide, you can see that so we show just consumer market share over time. The green line, the fiber, and the blue line is currently the leader cable up on top, but it's kind of starting to slip a little bit. In every case through history, whatever's best at the time eventually wins and takes the share, and you can see that occurring. It's taking longer for fiber because it can't just be converted with a flip of a switch. It's obviously meaning building out the whole nation, but that is occurring as well. So fiber share continues to grow. Next slide. And some people are showing that in their public information that their first year take rate is really improving, is doubling or tripling what they get in the first year over what they used to get in that first year or first few months. And that really is great for their revenue. It probably portends a greater eventual final take rate. It takes 5-7 years before the take rate kind of stabilizes, but that just shows more evidence that fiber is being consumed and preferred by consumers. Next slide. And if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. Oh, just a quick view. There's a lot, as you know, of addressable households out there. I'm going to speed up just a little bit. We're getting close to the end here, but 140 million to go, or 140 million opportunity between primary homes and second homes. The next slide shows the growth anticipation from public funding, just huge funding. This is from Jeffries, and it just shows the amount that is being awarded, not necessarily transmitted at that point, but huge growth over time. And the next slide shows that the private money just continues to flow as well. Here's a list of some of the people that have been getting involved for private equity, on top of the money that's coming from reinvested by service providers itself. So all this money is flowing because there's a need and an opportunity with fiber. Next slide. And a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. Here we're showing the challenges, and interestingly, this meets up exactly with the little poll that we took at the beginning of this. Workforce labor is the #1 concern from our providers, mid-sized and smaller providers in our survey. And cost was #2, and then materials supply concerns #3, and then you get into regulatory concerns, permitting, speed regulations, things like locates and specific things, pole access and so forth. So there are concerns out there. The Fiber Broadband Association is the place that is really trying to work on all these concerns and smooth the road for people going forward. And I think the final slide is the next one. And well, I think we'll just skip that for now. But Gary, let's stop it there, and feel free to take any questions.
Mike, as usual, fantastic work and real exciting. I mean, 9 million homes, a new record on fiber deployment. So you have to scratch your head, right? When on the deployment side, we went from 8.3 million last year's big record to 9 million homes. Yet the supply side, the factories are quiet, and our suppliers have been in this industry have been struggling this year. from the oversupply in the previous years. When are we going to be worked down at inventory? When are things going to normalize?
Well, I wish I could answer that question exactly. And I know people that work for these companies are getting that question from their CEOs every day. But I think we're getting close. I think, in our survey, we did ask, what was your highest level in terms of months of supply and what's your current level? It's definitely getting down there. It could be turning around basically now, or it could be the first part of the year. And it really depends on the type of vendor. There's differences in the excess supply for fiber cable versus outside plant enclosures and so forth. So it's hard to say, but I think many people will be seeing that soon. And I think also some providers are really realizing that this is an opportunity to build while they have workforce available before all the additional government money hits. So I expect deployment to turn up even further. And so I think things could really start bouncing back pretty quick.
So we did 9 million this year. So what do you think we'll do next year, 2024?
Well, we do an annual
10%,
forecast.
13% growth, or?
Yeah, we have, this is the time of year where we renew our forecast report. We haven't done that yet. So I can't say with any precise number, but I think it will be definitely up in that range. Most people think it'll be later 24 or even 25 before the BEAD money really starts flowing in a big way. But there's other government money out there and all this private money. So we really need to analyze that carefully. But barring, some geopolitical, economic catastrophe, we expect a good increase next year.
So 2024 will be another record year of fiber deployment. We still have to draw down some inventory. Can you talk a little bit about the seasonality? I mean, obviously, if you're in Minnesota, it's probably not, or in Alaska, you're not doing a lot of construction of fiber. Can you talk about how the seasonality impact and
Sure.
when we can see the deployment?
Well, definitely there is some seasonality, and you can see that through some statistics we've looked at, not in our case from our own research, but other research. And definitely, this time of year is the slowest, the first part of the year after Christmas, but basically weather related, coldness. But then you reach your peak, in the middle of the summer. So that does have an impact, but I think the seasonality won't impact the buying as much because people tend to realize that is just a factor they have to live with. So.
What about, does that get offset? I mean, I know operators like to spend their CapEx in the first half of the year so they can get the benefits in the second half. Does that get offset much, or is it just?
Yeah, I think there is some offset there. I think, I haven't looked at this really closely, but to the extent I have, it looks like the buying patterns are not, adjacent to the seasonal patterns. People obviously are getting prepared for their year of build and want to make those commitments. And so, that's the other side of the story. They don't want too much inventory. The risk would be people draw down their inventory too far. They're getting pressure from their financial people who are financing things at a much higher rate. But I would recommend that people don't go too far. Things could snap back in the other direction pretty dramatically just because of the build speed that we're seeing, acceleration.
Mia, can you go to that slide that says fiber wins among those churning in the past 2 years? This slide, I think, is quite a bit different than the last study we did 2 years ago. Yeah. So, the last time you did this, as I recall, fiber took tons of market share, but wireless lost 2 points of market share. Now it gained 11 points. And then the other big thing is DSL took the brunt of it. Obviously, we've worked out a lot of DSL out of the network. So now cable modems has taken the most loss in market share. So what's going on with fixed wireless? Why are we seeing it go from -2 to plus 11.
Sure. Well, despite the fact that 5G was not the panacea that it was promoted to be, it is better, and where it has been promoted, used even in the mid-band range, which doesn't give that potential of a high band range. It has allowed many people to move from poor DSL or poor cable or whatever to a wireless solution where they're maybe went from 2 megabit, 10 megabits, 2 megabits up to 20 or even 50 with wireless. So there has been improvement, and for some people it's been a big improvement. And so you're actually seeing pretty good net promoter scores and so forth. But there's just a limit there, and the wireless companies realize that this jump is over. Now it gets tougher, and they also have to be very careful with their spectrum, and they can't, they readily admit they can only do so many wireless, fixed wireless people with their spectrum to maintain what they need for their mobile networks and so forth.
So what you're saying
yes, it's
is
a jump, but I don't think it'll continue.
So it's a short-term phenomenon, a little bubble,
Yeah.
especially as fiber goes from 10 gig to 25 and terabits and so forth. So,
Right.
okay. And then, how's DSL still holding some market share? Is that just because that's the only thing available?
I think that's primarily the reason. I mean, there's also just stickiness in the market. Some people, it's a hassle to move. Some people are slow to move. But as you can see on the slide showing market share, DSL has just been crashing over the last few years. So it's very little of that left. I'm actually on a DSL line at the moment, but fiber is at my doorstep. So I will have it next time we do this talk.
Yeah, we had someone asked to go back to the slide on private investment. It's huge. And I think they wanted to see and these slides are available, right, Mia? You can, people can just request them and they'll send them to them.
Sure.
Yes.
So a couple slides after this. Mia, can you advance? Yeah, there you go. No, keep going. Let's see. It's before that one. 2 slides before that one.
One of the first slides, yeah, right there.
Next one. There you go. So they wanted to see, do you have any other commentary? I mean, I get calls every day, people wanting to private equity and other investments, not only domestically, but from all over the world. People are looking to invest in the US.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been a huge realization that for every door of fiber, that valuation is much higher than some other kind of internet. And in these tough times, people have seen the opportunity to get a very solid return on their investment, whether they continue to operate it or whether eventually they'll be, flipping companies and consolidating some companies. But as you can see, and this is just a sample of some of the people, hopefully I've spelled everyone correctly there, but many people have seen this as a huge opportunity for a good investment in the past couple of years.
Well, Mike, as always, fantastic research. Really appreciate everything that you do for FBA and our industry, and working hard to make sure that every home and business is connected with fiber by the end of the decade. So it looks like we're on the right trajectory. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Look forward to getting back together next Wednesday for our 4th episode of our quantum series. And our guest is going to be one of my favorite quantum physicists, Dr. Duncan Earl, who's the physicist and founder of Cubatech. He's going to be discussing quantum technology, securing critical infrastructure and sensitive data. So you're not going to want to miss that. So please, after you eat before you eat your turkey for Christmas, come join us, and we'll be hanging out with Duncan Earl and talking about quantum stuff. So I love it. I will see you guys. Hope you guys have a great holiday, and see you guys next week.